This episode is the first of a series called Source Material that we've put together in partnership with Firestone Walker. They're celebrating their 30th anniversary this year and are marking the occasion in a variety of ways. But this series focuses on the way they work with hop growers and brokers around the globe, as well as various hop industry groups to support, evaluate, select, and use this incredibly important aromatic and flavorful beer ingredient. When you look at the top restaurants around the world, no matter what cuisine they may focus on, there's one commonality they all share. That's deep relationships with those who grow and raise the very best ingredients. And it's the same in beer. You can't be the best at what you do without the meaningful personal, financial, and long-standing relationships that ensure the brewery has access to the very best ingredients. These relationships don't materialize overnight, but are the product of the past 30 years of work. And in this series, we'll highlight a number of these crucial growers, brokers, and processors who've played a role in the world-class beer that Firestone Walker makes. Joining me to introduce this series is my friend and Firestone Walker brewmaster, Matt Brindleton. Matt, hops are personal for you, and they reflect your roots as a hop scientist and researcher before jumping in head first as a brewer many years ago. And this story of hops and Firestone Walker is one you love to tell.
Well, thanks, Jamie. Thanks so much for taking this on and putting this series together. It will no doubt be great because you're involved. You have such a great way of kind of leading us to answer questions that other brewers are interested in learning about. And yeah, I mean, we picked hops. Why? Because, you know, all brewers love hops. It's easy to fall in love with hops. My relationship with hops started actually before I became a brewer. I'm one of these old timers now in this business that was fortuitous enough to kind of land in the hops industry right as craft brewing was taking off. It all started in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I was drinking the beers of Larry Bell and the Bell's Brewing Company and learning a lot through talking to their brewers. And then fell in this job at a spice extraction company called Calsec that still is in the industry today, very active in the industry. Paul Todd was leading that company at the time, and he and his family had, gotten involved in spice extraction that led them to the hop industry. They had some patents on light stable hop extracts and other downstream products. So believe it or not, I started on that end of the spectrum, kind of on, what you might call, more heavily processed products for larger brewers. But all of the science and all the amazing things that kind of draw you in when you talk about hops were there. And so I started as a hop chemist. That led me to going to brewing school. I already loved, home brewing and Bell's beers back in Kalamazoo. And I kind of woke up at the helm of this brewery in Chicago, Goose Island Beer Company. And the rest of the journey goes from there. But very early on, and I think most brewers have this experience, very early on, as you mentioned, when you want to try to make great beer, great food, great anything, you need great ingredients. And really the only way to tap into that is to meet the maker, so to speak. And so I was fortunate enough early on in my career to meet hop growers, to meet hop merchants, and go on this amazing journey.
Sure. And these relationships, as people hear throughout these conversations, are deep and long. And when you make beer at the quality and scale and demand ingredients at the quality you do to make such great beer, it requires commitment to each other. That commitment, it's just something you've taken seriously. You've been building these relationships for all of the 30-year history of Firestone Walker. Throughout this source material series, we'll take a deep look at the way Firestone Walker supports hop research, works with overseas growers, the ins and outs of Pacific Northwest hop growing, and we'll even take a look at how you, Matt, and the deeply talented Firestone Walker Brewing team approach hops from every direction. We're going to kick things off with a look at Firestone Walker's involvement with the Hop Quality Group. This is a consortium of top craft brewers that have come together to collaborate directly with the broader hop industry, help them grow and process better hops. And then that's something that benefits brewers, but it particularly benefits craft beer drinkers, as it's easy to make average beer with great ingredients, but it's impossible to make truly great beer with average ingredients, as you know. Of course, when you mix great ingredients with talented brewers and a relentless drive to be the best you can be, that is when the magic happens. Future episodes in this series will include Firestone Walker head brewer Dustin Krall in conversation with Bud Hollingberry, Firestone Walker raw materials manager and brewer Tim Miller, and fifth generation's New Zealand hop farmer Brent McGlashan, and you, Matt, along with your friend of mine, Russian River's Vinny Chilurzo and Michael Roy of Roy Farms, in a live conversation from our Brewers Retreat last year. But kicking off the source material series is this conversation I had with Firestone Walker's Sam Tierney, who runs the Propagator Brewhouse in Venice, California. Is someone I always love talking to about brewing.
Yeah, Sam's amazing.
Tell people a little bit about the Propagator before we get into this, Matt.
Yeah, so almost 10 years ago now, I can't believe it's been that long, Adam and David decided that it was really important to have kind of a foundational piece in Southern California, since that was becoming one of our biggest markets that we were growing into outside of the 805 or the Central Coast. And Adam found this location kind of on the outskirts of Venice Beach. It was a fairly sizable property for, inner city LA, with, a big parking lot and a couple buildings for us to work out of. And we put, I guess what you'd call a brew pub, but for us, it's our experimental brewery. We put a 10 hectoliter Casper Schultz brew kit in there. So it's kind of like the Porsche of pub brewing. We put it fully automated, which maybe in retrospect, we would have maybe simplified it. The idea was that brewers from Paso could go down and be familiar not only with the brewing process, but the software that was driving it. And, after a couple brewers took their turns through there, we landed with Sam Tierney at the helm. He now is, 12, 15 years with the company now. And, speaks the language, knows our beers, knows the raw material, but also just has a real curiosity for beer, and has done just such a great job. So we're kicking off new recipes there. We're looking at new raw materials. And Sam's generating a lot of, especially what I like to call our beer flavored beers. So we're not doing a lot of the, if we're looking at seltzer or alternative to beer products, he doesn't have to worry too much about that. He's mostly focused on our new IPAs, new yeast strains, lager beers. A great example is we just released Sun Glider, which is a beer that he worked on for about a year prior to being released here in Paso.
Sam is also highly involved in the hop quality group on behalf of Firestone Walker. And this conversation also includes another brewer actively involved, Patrick Chavanelle, the R&D manager for this little brewery you might have heard of, Allagash in Portland, Maine. The hop quality group has been doing important work in the beer world for many years, and the new hops coming out of the hop quality group breeding program will hopefully have positive impacts both for brewers and for growers themselves. With all that said, let's jump right into the conversation. Welcome back to the podcast, Sam.
Thanks, Jamie. Really happy to be back.
And also joining us from the other side of the country in Maine, Patrick Chavanelle from Allagash. Welcome to the podcast, Patrick.
Thanks for having me. Stoked to be here.
Both of you are actively involved in the hop quality group and are participate in the work that the hop quality group does. Sam, why don't you give us a little bit of background in what the hop quality group is in a fundamental sense, how it came about, why brewers, because it was a creation of brewers who got together, craft brewers, in fact, to fill a gap as some of the biggest brewers started spending less of their energy focusing on this concept of hop quality. This is a unique, an invention or creation of craft brewers who saw a need in the overall market for craft brewers brewers to have this bigger quality conversation with growers and advocate for better hop quality, and also provide the resources and the tools that growers need, and that kind of interface between the brewing industry and the hop growing industry, in order to help everyone grow better hops, process better hops, and then ultimately make better beer. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on what that hop quality group is?
Sure. Yeah. So Hop Quality Group was originally founded in 2010, and I believe it happened over a meeting at the CBC that year. That was a year before I started Firestone. I was actually going to Siebel and Doman's in 2010 and had yet to land a job at a brewery. I was still in my brewing school phase. So I wasn't privy to any of the early discussions, but that it was a small group of breweries to start, and Firestone Walker was one of those. I think it came from the idea that, craft brewers needed to be a little bit closer to their raw materials. And, at the time, there was a lot of interest in hops because of the popularity of IPA starting to really, really come into prominence in the craft beer space. And so, the brewers that started it really wanted to focus on getting those direct connections with the growers, really being able to communicate the concerns that we had over quality, because the main premise being that dry hopping was becoming so prominent in the industry, and the former quality programs and how they existed in the industry kind of were geared toward this idea that hops get boiled, hops are a processed product, they get made into extract, not so much as a fresh product that goes into, finished beer, and that doesn't necessarily go through this sterilizing step. From there, they connected with Val Peacock, who had recently retired from Anheuser-Busch, and he was instrumental in helping the group set up this kind of grower relation aspect where, we wanted to go out, visit farmers, talk to them, just really get to know them, and really talk about how we used hops, the things that we really wanted to see, and the concerns that we had as far as, food safety and quality, and just ideas that we had for how, we could work together to change the way hops are picked, processed, stored, to maybe benefit the newer aromas and flavors that we were looking for, and kind of move away from the old paradigm of hops as a bit more of a commodity, something that was to be extracted and stored for years, potentially, just a slightly different approach. 2015, if you fast forward then, that's when we first started on the breeding partnership. And that kind of takes us, I guess, into the next phase. But the first few years there, we're just getting this kind of relationship going with all the growers and the brokers. And, it was instrumental too. We never intended to shortcut the brokers that we work with, that we buy most of our hops through. And those relationships are key as well. So this was all done together. So we worked with everybody, like Steiner, Haas, Yakima for the three main ones that I think, early on in my experience we were meeting up with them. We were visiting lots of farms. And that turned into an annual program where each year before harvest and now, and this is expanded around the world, by the way. This is, it started in Washington, but Oregon, Idaho, Michigan. I mean, we're, members around the country are visiting local farms as well. And then we've done some international work, going to New Zealand, Australia, Germany. So, originally it was just, we want to go see the farms while they're not picking, basically like before harvest, right? Brewers go to harvest, every year. They see the machinery in action, but it's good to visit beforehand when there's a little bit of time, a little bit of breathing room, and be able to kind of look over everything and walk through the process and have those conversations with the growers when they're not in. I mean, harvest is so hectic, right? And so being able to catch them a little bit before has been really good. And we all learned a lot too. I mean, the brewers, I remember my first couple of years of being able to visit farms in this capacity was just so eye-opening, being able to walk through the entire process and really see all the key points that mattered, and to see all the great work that, the hop brokers were already doing in their quality programs, and just finding out how we could better work together to improve it for everybody.
I think right there too, the work together aspect is like a critical piece of it, where nowadays it's kind of the norm for brewers to visit growers. Like, it's amazing how that relationship has developed over time. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it wasn't quite that same dynamic. And I think the Hop Quality Group really helped kind of bring things to where they are today in terms of that brewer-grower relationship. And I remember, and I was actually looking back through my emails to try to figure out when it was exactly my first trip was. And that was actually the first time that Sam and I met each other. It was in 2017. We were doing the Washington trip, and we met there and went to a bunch of farms. And times back then, even in 2017, were still a little dicey in terms of some growers were like, why are there a group of brewers wanting to come visit right now? Like, there was some confusion as to like what we were actually trying to achieve. And it was just, having the amount of people on those trips that were all representing craft brewers. Although when we were there, we were really representing Hop Quality Group. We weren't there as like a representative of our individual breweries. It went a long way in terms of showing them how important something like food safety is to us. So I think those initial visits kind of laid the foundation to what this brewer-grower dynamic and relationship is today.
You mentioned it, Sam, because the macro brewers were primarily driving this relationship with hop growers for a lot of the history of hop growing in North America. And again, focused on alpha acids and bitterness, something that was going to be boiled. And it's interesting to see that, as we got into the early 2010s and these expressive hop-forward beers started to gain momentum, you almost can't pull apart the growth in the aroma and flavor varieties of hops, the quality of those, and the growth of these beer styles. Things like hazy IPA as a style really aren't possible unless you have beautiful, expressive, well-grown hops kilned at lower temperatures to allow more of those oils to carry through. Like, all of this kind of depends on having those quality hops in a quantity available to a larger number of brewers. And so to see this group of craft brewers who are individually not large enough to have giant departments focused on this as some of the macro brewers were, but to come together in this collaborative way through the Hop Quality Group to advocate for the entire industry of craft and all of this evolving approach to brewing and beer styles. It's kind of a cool thing, but I think it almost is. You have to connect this growth in some of these expressive beer styles to the actual ingredients themselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I look at the way the hop landscape has changed, in my time as a brewer now, going on 15 years. And it really is amazing the amount of innovation that has happened in the hop space. And, I'd like to think that the developing relationships, has been really key to that, and having everyone, find that common ground where we're all working towards this goal together. And I think that, that was the main goal with the Hop Quality Group, and so far, I think we feel it's been very successful.
So food safety, treating hops as a food ingredient has been a big thing for Hop Quality Group. If you go to the Yakima Valley now, you'll see lots of signs. Hops is a food. Hops are food. Beer is food. May treat these places that are processing this with the same kind of care and safety that you would treat, food production. As I mentioned, kilning temperatures were a big one that Hop Quality Group played a part in helping bring down across the industry some of those kilning temperatures to burn off fewer of those, beautiful and expressive hop oils. Talk about some of the other initiatives then through the later 20 teens that the Hops Quality Group tackled, and obviously Cascade Cup is a piece of that to kind of highlight quality amongst growers themselves, but also celebrate when you find that kind of quality. What are some of the other initiatives that the Hop Quality Group has kind of focused on?
Well, a big one. So, looking back to those initial farm visits, there was a gap. So there was a need that the Hop Quality Group members saw and found a way to come up with a solution around for food safety specifically. Then looking a bit ahead in terms of hop breeding and public hops specifically, around the 2015 timeframe, the USDA public breeding program, there was basically underfunded. There wasn't a whole lot of financial support for that program, so there was this need there, and the fact that at that time too, there are more and more of these proprietary hops coming out that more brewers are using, especially in these hop forward beers like IPAs, hazies, and whatnot. That seemed like there was not only a need to provide funding to that program, but also to go at it from potentially a different perspective that hops had been bred historically through public hops. So the approach was essentially, first and foremost, we want to make sure that anything that goes through this breeding process is an agronomically viable option. Make sure the agronomics from a grower's perspective are good, because not only do growers want to make sure that they're growing something that they like to grow and has a good yield, but also that's beneficial from the brewer's perspective too, where if something yields well, then generally the prices tend to be a bit more favorable. So there's that angle, but more importantly, that we really wanted the focus to be on these high impact aroma hops. And that wasn't necessarily the goal in the past for public hops in general. So that was a major focus. And in 2015, that was the first year that we started working with the USDA Agricultural Resource Service and Dr. John Henning and his team specifically in Corvallis, Oregon, to help kind of support and create this partnership between the Hop Quality Group and the USDA. And I'll just say too that hop breeding, it's not a quick process. It takes a lot of time. We went into this project knowing that, but also we wanted to do everything that we could to kind of help speed things up a little bit. Because I think Dr. Kale Altendorf, who's the breeder or was the breeder out in Washington, who is going to be taking over Dr. Henning's position in Oregon now. She had a presentation a couple of years ago talking about the average length of time from the initial cross to having a viable product available to brewers is 12 plus years. So we didn't want it to take that long for us. So we kind of accelerated certain parts of the process and really leaned into and relied on brewer feedback as well as analytical data, such as measuring thiols on these very early stage selections of, just rub and sniff samples when you only have a couple hills or a single hill of a particular line. So not only are we doing a sensory feedback on that and pooling that together of all of the Hop Quality Group members, but we're also overlaying thiol information that we're outsourcing, which at the time, or right now, that might be a bit more of the norm if proprietary breeders are looking for these very, thiol aroma forward hops. But back then it was not the norm at all. And really there's only one lab that was doing this sort of analysis. It was expensive. You had to ship it out to France. So we were kind of changing this approach to public breeding specifically and trying to help that program come up with some interesting hop varieties.
that evaluation process is such an interesting one. I have been involved and gone in and done some of the sessions that they typically would hold during CBC, have blind samples, have a digital survey kind of set up so that you would go through, taste those blind samples and give your sensory feedback. And doing this in aggregate en masse with a whole room full of brewers gives you the kind of broad sensory impact and information that can help guide next decision making for a hop quality group. Such a cool kind of broad collective way to do it. I think we should probably also address what the benefit of something like a public variety versus a proprietary variety is. Within the hop industry, there is space for all of these things. You have individual farms and individual breeding programs that are commercial breeding programs like hop HBC, which is a cooperative between Yakima Chief Ranches and John I. Haas. And so together that HBC program develops some of those varieties, and we have great ones like Simcoe and Citra that they have created and bred, and they then control the intellectual property behind that, and ultimately can decide which hop growers get to grow those hops and in order to maintain a certain, the correct amount on the market. The public varieties provide also some balance to that. And so that, or at least as I understand it, this is the intention from the hop quality group, to balance that with some also attractive, expressive flavor and aroma hops that not just give a broader approach to flavor and aroma, but also give growers some other ways to work different varieties in that might hit in different spaces within their growing program. When you all look at it from that perspective, what do you find the benefit to the public breeding program to be?
I think the growth of the brewing industry and craft beer in general has really shown us the advantage of having a really varied industry. And it's, I would say it's like competition breeds innovation, and that's true, but craft brewers don't like to think of ourselves as competing necessarily, and that's just kind of how we like to approach things. So I wouldn't say it's competition, yes, but it's really about having varied approaches. And that breeds resiliency into the system, right? So if we all put our eggs in one basket, there's more of a systemic risk to the industry. And so I think this varied approach is really key to keeping the hop industry and the beer industry overall in a healthier place. And, we use a lot of proprietary hops, and we love many varieties from the breeding programs that have come out, they're still, I love to death, Simcoe obviously is a special place in our heart for all our West Coast IPA brewers, that since you mentioned that, but I think that the USDA program, it allows this different approach in which, we can have a little bit, and yes, I do like the idea that you produce a variety. If you're a private program, you come up with a great hop variety. You have an amount of control because of that I think has led to the increase in quality that we have seen in some ways, because, being able to hold growers to certain standards and make sure people just aren't going rogue on you, I think can be really beneficial to establishing a new variety, to being able to come to brewers and say, when you buy this hop variety, you are getting a certain level of quality, you're getting a certain profile. Whereas, if a new, and I think this has been a bit of an issue with some of the USDA varieties that have come out over the past years, is that growers take varied approaches to them, picking windows. There's not as much guidance on how to process, pick, what they should be doing. And so quality can be more varied, and there have been some issues because of that. So I think that there's room for both approaches, and really looking at what some of the breeding companies have done has been very instrumental in showing us how to release a hop, how this should be done, and that's why I think that the partnership with Hop Quality Group is definitely a different approach, something we haven't seen before, because it's brewers being involved from the very early steps, and then doing some of that testing and, being able to be the resource, right? So like when this hop gets out in the world, we're there to say, hey, we've already been working on this. We're going to help guide everyone. And, hopefully we can kind of replicate some of the success and make up for some of the issues that have happened before.
That's an interesting point. You come up with a new hop variety and it can work well on the test farm, but that's one plot in one place, generally speaking. And then getting it out there and figuring out how that grows, not just, between Moxie and Sunnyside or Grandview, but also in the Willamette Valley or Idaho, and figuring out how one of these hop varieties grows in these different places, and then figuring out when to pick it to optimize the character that you're looking for from that. Like, it becomes a very big, multifaceted problem. And of course, as you start growing it in more places and harvesting it at different times, then different brewers have different kinds of reactions to it, and you can kill one of those babies in the crib pretty easily if brewers have a bad experience with it and then don't want to try it again. And so, kind of managing that and making sure that what brewers what the experience that they're having with these hops is a good one from the very outset is an interesting problem to have to manage even while you are trying to create these kinds of opportunities. So an incredibly difficult kind of thing to even bring a new variety around. But maybe that's a good segue to talk about what the kind of fruits of sort that this project has been bearing recently. Patrick, why don't you talk about how we get through the pandemic with the Hop Quality Group, but now the program, especially the breeding program, really started to gain steam and have some meaningful results that have led to an actual hop variety that you all have released out there into the world.
Yeah, so these past, 3-4 years were the start of this sort of next stage. So, prior to that, all our evaluation processes were just those initial rub and sniffs of the advanced line. So those are kind of the single hill plots or the 20 to 40 hill plots. After that, once you find something that has brewers' interest, that's been flagged as something that we want to see grown out on a larger scale, that's when you start talking about on-farm grow-outs. So what that essentially looks like is working with interested growers, growing anywhere from 1 to 2 acres of a particular line, and harvesting and then evaluating. And that's what we've been kind of handling these last 3-4 years or so, where initially we started off with 4 elites. So elites, and I guess in our language, the way we talk about them are when it sort of reaches or transitions from that advanced stage to an on-farm grow out. Speaking to exactly your point that you made a minute ago in terms of different growing regions having different characteristics, we kept that in mind from the get-go. So we specifically chose growers in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho for that reason, because we realize that there are different dynamics for each one in particular. Like for Oregon, for instance, you don't have a first year harvest for babies. That just doesn't exist. Year 0 or year 1, however you want to classify it, is really that second year. So that's one challenge you have to kind of work with. And then each area has different harvest timing and so on and so forth. So understanding the differences across at least all 4 was something that we wanted to have a good grasp on before it kind of advanced to a fully released line. What we realized and what position we kind of put ourselves in was that we found ourselves with a lot of hops on hand that we had to deal with. And we never wanted to be in a position where we're selling hops. That's not what the intention behind this program is or was. And that's kind of where we found ourselves. So through many, many conversations and a lot of lessons learned over these last 3 years or so, we have kind of taken an approach where we pulled out a lot of those initial elites. So we started with 4, then I think the next season it was 3, and then the next season it was 2. Because we really just wanted to focus on the one kind of winner in our eyes that's kind of popped up in the very, very early stages from both a sensory aspect and an analytical aspect, where these measured thiol contents of this one in particular, Thora is what it was eventually named and is named now, were just kind of off the charts. Not literally off the charts, but when you compare it to the other advanced lines that we had in process and cultivars like Mosaic and Citra, it was above and beyond even those. So it was kind of like this big aha moment, like, whoa, I think we have something here. And we have processes for brewing trials, and all of those scored highly anytime we were brewing with Thora. At that early stage, it was called HQG4. So going back to talking about those on-farm grow outs, not only do you have this kind of capacity or excess amount of hops that you have to deal with, which we were essentially just trying to sell in a way, but not really, to our member brewers. And we just ended up putting them on the Lupulin exchange, but no one was really purchasing them. And then there's this other aspect of these growers are essentially taking on this risk financially of growing these lines that they cost something. The cost per acre, at least a couple of years ago, something like $13,000 an acre, and this kind of varies based on area, but that's a lot of money, really. When you take that and kind of multiply it out by each area, each grower, the amount of acres they have per line, like, it's a lot. And we wanted to make sure that they were being able to like recoup that cost and not just have to like eat it in the end. So essentially, through many conversations with not only Dr. Henning, because we're not growers, we don't really know what we're doing. We have more of a sense now because we've learned a lot. But through conversations with Dr. Henning and our what we called primary grower partners, who are Crosby Hops, CLS, and Jackson Farm. We learned a lot over time and came to this this new approach, I guess you can call that, of these on-farm grow outs, where instead of us taking in this inventory, trying to sell it in a way, taking that money and then reimbursing the grower, it gets all tricky to navigate, and it's just kind of messy. Where in the end, they took on essentially even more risk of saying, we'll grow them and then we'll just sell them. And it was just this easier way of them being able to not only just recoup the growing costs, but also to hopefully like make a little money in the end. But again, like they have this risk, and some of these hops that for those early elite lines too, that like we didn't know whether or not they had legs and had the chance to advance. So they're taking on a significant amount of risk, and we really, really appreciate what they've done. So I know I'm rambling a little here, and sorry, I tend to do that a lot. So I don't know if you can get me on track.
I love it. It's almost like you had a hop final four, where you've got your final 4 elite varieties that have come out of this breeding program, that have like played through the season against a whole vast number of other potentials. But now you've got these 4 lines of different hops, and you put them into the ground. And then you really start playing and seeing how they can play away games, home games. They can play on the fields in Oregon. They can play on the fields in Idaho, and then you really get to see it. But you're right, you want to move pretty quickly, because that's now you're creating a lot of hops that are ultimately probably not going to go to the market, and you want to figure out which one of those is going to be the one that you want to put all of your energy into, and it's going to, become that champion that you get out there with. And so, so then, and part of that is also, as we talked about, these kinds of sensory tests with, with you all at the Hop Quality Group, brewing and sampling through this and using these elite varieties and being able to kind of make some sensory judgments. Talk me about some of the brewing that you all did with some of these varieties early on, and how that test process proceeded to see how those various candidates would work in beer itself.
Well, going back a few years, I remember when we first started getting enough quantities of the different varieties to do, pilot scale trials at various breweries. I'm trying to think, Patrick, if you could remind me which year that was. It was probably 2021 or 2022, where breweries, we all kind of brewed different beers featuring the different hops. And it was a little tough because the house character of the different breweries factored in relatively more than we had maybe anticipated, where we all kind of wanted to brew simple beers featuring the hops. And, just to be able to share the burden of all this work, we decided that, different breweries would do different hops. And after that, and I think, after getting together at CBC and tasting the beers, we kind of decided moving forward, we needed to kind of commit to one brewery, maybe handling more of it. So then for the last couple of years, Firestone's taken that on in doing really small scale trials with, splitting one wort stream into, 6 different tanks and doing something like that. And so that's something that we could do with our small pilot system, and then get an identical beer, with the different hops. And really, that's the best way to do this. Obviously, there's no way around it. And so, that led us to some really good results as far as, getting good feedback, and then having a lot of people taste that, the CBC, and get good data from that.
Tell me about what those brews would look like, Sam. Because so you would brew one wort and then split out into, because it's a 7-barrel, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. So we would take from actually a larger batch.
Casper Schultz system.
Yeah. So those trials we would actually be doing off of the larger production brew house.
Oh wow.
Where we can just take beer. So we'll split off of a larger batch, and we've used a couple different streams, but usually something like, either pale ale or lighter IPA strength, and then just single dry hops with each hop, essentially. And, that allowed us to get a really good impression. There are still some limits to that. Obviously, you don't get to assess each hop for its bittering capabilities or some more of the hot side capability, but, most aroma impact we're seeing these days in the IPA style is coming from dry hopping. So we feel fairly confident that if we can prove it there, then you can work back from there, plus it just, that adds another layer of complication that's really hard to manage. And then, but then once we had the elite lines picked and we had more volume for the brewers to brew with, then everyone started brewing with them just to feel out what they liked in any given hop, And I remember the first time, that I had a beer of complete back to front, batch of beer made with what would become Thora, which was HQG4 at the time, was at the hop convention in Santa Rosa. And I think that was 3 years ago. And Russian River brewed this really amazing beer with it. And I think that was my first light bulb moment where I tasted that and I went, oh, this is something special, And of course, Vinny was the right brewer to handle that, I think, for everybody. And then have that beer pouring they did a tour of the production brewery one of the nights after the convention. And I remember everyone trying that beer and just the buzz, so that was really special. But then subsequently, we've all been able to brew with the elite hops and, kind of picked, what we liked and didn't like and, assess them. And, Thora became the champion after that.
So Patrick, for you, what was it about Thora in your own brewing tests and your own tasting that set it apart. Of course, thiol content, oil content was hitting on numbers that that looked really good from a kind of quantitative perspective, but from a qualitative perspective, we know it's not just the amount of oil that's in there; it's the way that they work together in this this kind of unique way in any hop variety that makes them truly interesting. For you, what was it about that with Thora that made it compelling?
A big part of the reason, I guess, is that just going back to the fact that this is a publicly available hop now. And I can't think of something that is similar to it, at least right now, that's been fully released. To have these characteristics of passion fruit and guava, that historically hasn't correlated to prior public varieties. I know Vista is a little different, but it was one of the more recent ones. And you can't use that terminology to describe that hop. It's just a different hop. So maybe it's not a fair comparison. But even prior to that, to the fact that it had these qualities that, and to your point, not only are there in its raw form, but when you use them to make a beer on both hot and cold side additions, it stays in the beer and it's very punchy. So I think it's just the thing that sticks out for me is just the overall intensity of the character that you get. Or our goal was to breed for high impact hops, and I think we achieved that in Thora. So you get what it's one thing that is a little tricky for me to navigate sometimes is when you see new hop varieties that are coming out, whether they're proprietary or public, you're given a list of descriptors. But you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt to some extent, where it's well, how did they get that? Was it the raw form? Was it in beer? Even if it's in beer, what beer did they brew? And there's so many variables where, different hop varieties that you can use with it, yeast, timing of additions, there's way too many variables to take into consideration and to be this hop smells exactly like this. It could have that character, but maybe not. But I feel with Thora, it does. If you want some passion fruit, guava, grapefruit character, that will be in the beer in the end. So you kind of know what you're going to get going into it. And I think that for me is what makes it special.
Sam, for you, is whether that was tasting some of those Thora versus other elite kind of beers back as you all were brewing these kinds of test batches, or even now brewing in a more focused way to understand what Thora itself does in terms of aroma and flavor expression. What is it that you like about it? And, from a kind of a brewing perspective, how have you found ways to add to that and to get the best kind of character out of Thora?
Well, most of the brewing we've done has been kind of exploring West Coast IPA with Thora. And I think, that's over the past year, we had a couple releases come out. So our Firestone Walker Invitational Beer Festival release beer this year, seasonal release, was a collaboration with Odell called Wandering Dawn, and that featured Thora. And I think we all really loved that beer. Also had some other cool hops in it, including some Chinook and Cascade from Colorado that I think factored into that. And some Mosaic as well. So I think the lesson there, and we did a double IPA release this spring as well, featuring Thora, that also had Mosaic and Citra, and so we've been seeing how does it add to the hops we already love in this style, and how does it push them in new directions? I think because as a single hop, it's a really fun, distinctive hop, and we all really enjoy it. And it's just such a cool, kind of delightful aroma in a way. I mean, it's the best way to describe it. It just gives you some really interesting stuff that you don't get from other single hops. But I think the strength that I've found so far has been it works really well with the hops that are already crushing it in the IPA space and pushes them in a fun direction, and so you can make these distinctive beers. It's like, if you're just kind of getting jaded that everyone's using the same combination of the same few hops in IPAs these days, which it does feel that way, because I think as brewers have gotten really good at brewing IPA and all the information that we share and everyone knows what everybody does now, we've cued in on like what makes the biggest, punchiest, boldest IPAs. What are the IPAs that are winning all the awards, that are, burning up the charts, that are selling the best? It's mostly a smaller group of hops that have kind of become the victors of that space. So how do you differentiate yourself now moving forward? And I think that Thora is a meaningful addition to that canon as far as blending with other great hops to tease out a little bit more of that kind of thiol-y tropical aroma in a way that, maybe you would look to a thiolized yeast, but it's a very different effect, obviously. It's orders of magnitude probably, and it's different. So yeah, that's been really fun. We've also done hazy IPA, and I think that, it complements that style just as well if you're using a more expressive yeast, using different strains. We've used Chico type yeasts, more haze positive 1 and 3 type yeast, a more classic English yeast that we use. So the Wandering Dawn beer was our house yeast, which is more of a classic English London strain that's not really hazy. So yeah, we've had fun with it all across the IPA spectrum at this point, and I think it fits in just about anywhere.
So Sam, is there a future now for Thora at Firestone Walker, and how are you all looking at how to work that into the next tier of beers? Because from an innovation perspective, Firestone Walker is always planning ahead, always looking ahead, looking year ahead, 2 years ahead, and trying to plot out, where things go in this industry, in the beer industry in general. Having fresh things to excite drinkers is pretty important, and so figuring out ways to tell new stories is something that you all are constantly doing. How does Thora fit into that in the future?
So yeah, we have committed, we already bought a good amount of the Thora crop for 2025. And, some other brewers were asking me about it recently, and they were saying, oh, how can I get some Thora? And I was like, well, okay, here's the growers that are growing it so far. You should inquire. And then, someone gets back to me. Well, apparently a little brewery called Firestone Walker already bought, most of it. So I can't get what I wanted right now, but there was some out there. I don't know what the availability is right now. But I know that moving forward, that the growers that have it in the ground and are going to be putting more in next year are looking for brewers to contract with to guarantee that. And I think that it's a good reminder that if you want to see the success of something moving forward, the contracting system between hop growers, brokers, and brewers is important to keeping balance in the industry, because growers need to know that if they're going to commit to something and they're going to invest and they're going to put in all the resources that someone's committing to use it, and so that partnership and that's really important. So I do encourage people to do that. But as far as us specifically, we're looking at putting it in several beers moving forward. I'll have our 10th anniversary special release for the Propagator Brewery specifically. We'll feature that again this year, and then probably a couple other IPAs moving forward. So we're going to keep working on that, and I think because we love this hop so much and because it is so special to us, it's going to be factoring in the future for sure.
Well, that's a 10-year from the start of the program to having a named hop, and now growers growing more and more of it, you all supporting that growth and making sure that growers can be profitable, keeping that in the ground by taking a big chunk of that and making sure that they have a market to sell it through, which again helps them gain more confidence in planting a little bit more. But that kind of commitment to it is what helps make it successful. Super cool. There's so much more to creating, say, a new beer with a new hop than simply going to a grower and saying, "Oh, what do you have now?" That is this kind of long-term interplay and commitment to see something come through. And then, but a side of it that I think, some beer drinkers may even take for granted, the amount of work that you all have put into getting it from that point of an idea around a program to an actual hop to then actual beers using those actual hops. Patrick, for you all, how do you all see Thora figuring into Allagash in the future?
Oh, so glad you asked, because I was going to butt in earlier. I fully realize that Allagash is not a hop-forward brewery by any means, although we do have the hazy IPA out there. But we are planning on utilizing Thora, even showcasing it in a beer for next year. So at the very least, I know that we're doing that one. I guess I can't really say much more beyond that at this point. But we'll continue to, as part of my role, look for ways in which we can incorporate it into recipes and continue to just tinker around with it within the brewery, and hopefully stimulates some other ideas coming from other employees within Allagash, just by using it and putting it on tap for internal evaluations. So I could say for sure that we're using it in one beer next year, but it could be some more. At the very least, we'll be playing around with it a lot.
Deliberately cagey, but we'll be keeping an eye on the new release information as it comes out for more on that story around Thora. So now Hop Quality Group in a big picture has its first named hop from that public breeding program that it has supported and has gone through this entire thing. What is next on the horizon for Hop Quality Group in a broader sense? Where do the priorities remain? It is still this collaborative effort, and so what does the next year or the next 2 years hold for Hop Quality Group in terms of where your focus is?
That's a great question. Well, first off, with Thora specifically, we want to make sure that we don't just say, okay, hops released, we're done with our job. Because that's kind of where public hops have faltered to some extent, where a hop gets released, but the USDA, they don't have a marketing arm to help support it. They're relying on brewers to do that. And that's kind of our job right now for Thora, is to not only support the hop through purchasing, but to help get the word out there to build up this interest within the craft beer industry. And by doing that, get more people involved, more people contracting, really try to bolster the awareness around Thora specifically. So one thing that we'll be doing, one thing that we do every year is at CBC, we've talked about it already. We'll be doing our annual tasting there. This one will be open to the public, where as historically it hasn't been. So there will be a space on the floor to come and evaluate not only early stage lines, but potentially beers that include Thora. So we'll continue to do that and involve people in that process. Then beyond that, it's just continuing to support the programs we have in place, continuing to support growers in any way that we can, because as craft beer, as the industry is right now, there are some struggles, and with craft goes the hop industry to some extent too. So continuing to, have that dialogue with them, continuing to go out there and support them by going and doing these on-farm visits, and make sure that relationship stays strong through these challenging times. And after, those few things, we have been recently talking about, because I I get to sit on the E team. I'm the current vice president of the Hop Quality Group, with Jeremy Moinier being president. And I think you've done some conversations with him recently. We've been talking about how we need to have kind of like a 3 to 5 year plan. Like, what is the next gap that we can see ourselves playing a role in and helping out the industry move forward and continue to improve. So those are conversations that we're going to be having soon. So if you have any thoughts, or if anyone out there listening has any thoughts, please, I'm going to do a little plug right now. Feel free to reach out. Go to hopqualitygroup.com and there's a contact us form. Reach out if you're interested in learning more about what we do, or membership. Sorry if I was supposed to wait to do that towards the end, but we'd be more than happy to hear what folks have to say, and we're kind of all ears at this point. So.
And Sam, for you all in Firestone, how is that relationship, for the next several years with the Hop Quality Group remains an important one for you all?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a good run so far. I mean, just to see how things have grown, now over the last 15 years, and, to finally see the fruits of something that, it took a decade, is really amazing. And, it's only the beginning. And I think that if we can shepherd this hop into, the canon of the great IPA hops, or the great aroma hops in general, I think there's obviously still space in other beer styles. I don't mean to focus narrowly on IPA, even though, from market perspective now with new hops, that's where most of the energy is. But I will say, I look forward to, one of the other breeding program kind of goals from the beginning was, kind of an American Zazer type hop as well. And, that hasn't been at the top of the priority as far as where things have ended up going. But, that's something we're still interested in. And, we have, potentially many more years of this to come, hopefully. And so that's, I think our continued interest in that is where this is going. And, the membership of Hop Quality Group has expanded significantly in recent years. And that's allowed us to gather more resources together. And I think that, like Patrick was saying, if anyone else is interested, other brewers out there getting involved, we'd love to hear from everybody, and we'd love to see more interest, because, it's a fun program as far as, being able to focus so narrowly on something. Other trade organizations are much broader in, how they handle issues within the industry. And so being able to have something that's so focused, I think has been really beneficial, and has allowed us to just really geek out on something in a way that, it's like, for brewers that get into this, this has been one of the most fulfilling things I think we've been able to get involved in. And I feel like it's been really meaningful work that we're really proud of.
That is a great place to bring this to a close. Patrick, Sam, thanks for joining me for this conversation on hops quality and the Hops Quality Group, and all of the projects that you all are involved in, and Firestone Walker's role in all of that. It has been a pleasure to talk with you all about it. Cheers.
Right back at you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jamie.